Almost all movies and TV shows are recorded at a cinematic 24 frames per second. However, almost all consumer TVs up until 120Hz flat panels ran at 50 or 60 frames per second. To get those frames to fit, all 60Hz North American TVs had to perform something like an uneven 3-2 pull-down to get 24 frames to fit into 60. You're technically still getting the same 24 frames on screen per second, but with a 3-2 cadence, the frame times for two adjacent frames are always jumping up and down, which is intentionally exaggerated in this example. So one way to look at that is almost all of us were watching that content wrong this whole time. Now, most modern displays have the ability to view this content properly with an even cadence similar to the 5.5 demoed here. But not all 120Hz or higher displays can do it right, and sometimes you just want more control of your content. Also, while no consumer CRT TVs can display in higher refresh rates, even the cheapest PC CRTs can run at an even cadence of 24, making them a cheap and incredible choice for watching some older content, but you'd need to manually feed them that 72 or 96Hz signal. Well, if you have either RetroTINK 4K, you can display that content in the proper cadence on both modern displays and old PC CRT monitors. Let's check out how. A few disclaimers before we begin. First, what I'm about to show is nothing new. Many people who owned expensive projectors in the early 2000s used multi-thousand-dollar video processors to accomplish the same thing. There were even a few flat panels that could run at 48Hz, but those were pretty flickery. I've seen some plasmas that ran at 96Hz and looked great, but those weren't common and usually really expensive. Today it's the opposite. Most decent flat panels should be able to display proper cadence for 24p material, but you'll often find the settings you need to enable it buried deep in the menus. And even if you do find it, the labeling often makes no sense at all. Check out my older OLED. How on earth would anyone have figured out that you need to set each of these to 1 for proper conversion? And setting it higher enables that gross motion interpolation. Why can't they just label the menus properly? And even if your display claims to handle 24p properly, there's definitely scenarios in which you'll want more control of your content. Here's a quick example. I loved my BenQ projector, but it displayed 24p content weird. However, when I used my TINK to output 24p at higher multiples, it seemed to look better, and it looked amazing when I took it to the next level and integrated BFI as well. And BFI is another disclaimer. You'll need the info that you learn in this video in order to understand how to use your RetroTINKs to implement proper BFI into 24p content, but that's the next video that I'll be doing. So even if your modern display does 24p perfectly, this video is still worth a watch. And lastly, this video isn't sponsored by anybody and I'm not getting paid to make it. I truly just think this is info that anyone who owns a RetroTINK 4K should know. That said, I'm leaving an affiliate link wherever possible, as that and Patreon support is the only way this channel can survive. Okay, let's jump in. Let's quickly run through the basics of what you'll need. First, you'll need either of the RetroTINK 4Ks. The Pro could do more advanced processing with 480i content, which I'll show later, but if you already have a 24p source, like with most Blu-rays, the CE will work just as well. The older RetroTINKs won't be able to do any of this, but you may be able to force other video game scalers to work. However, I don't think video content is a focus of any alternatives. That said, the OSSC Pro has some amazing downscaling abilities and offers a VGA output board, so maybe someday it'll get 24p support and be able to do this as well. You'll also need a source device that can send 24p output. Most Blu-ray players have this as an option right in the menu, and streaming boxes like Apple TVs often have options like Match Source. I'll go over how to test this in the next section. Most people's sources will be HDMI, and if that's the case, you'll need an HDMI splitter that's compatible with both the source and RetroTINKs. I've been using these for years and really love them. You can even extract audio via the second HDMI port for your AVR, and their analog to digital conversion on the audio side is impressive considering the price. I mean, the audio DAC isn't amazing or anything, but as a feature built into a $30 box, it's really cool. If you have 4K content, you could also try a splitter that downscales to 1080p. However, I'm not sure how that would handle HDR, and most source boxes should have the ability to force a 1080p SDR output anyway. That's really the only downside of the RT4K. It can't handle a 4K HDR input, so for native 4K 24 content, you're still at the mercy of your TV settings, which might be fine. You could still watch that content through the TINK though. Just set your player's output to 1080p and let it downscale before going to the TINK. Next, if you'd like to try this on a PC CRT monitor, and I really hope you do, you'll need basically any PC CRT monitor from the 90s on up. Standard consumer CRTs definitely won't work, and almost all professional video monitors are also 60 Hz only, so sadly that amazing BVM you might own won't work for this. CRT projectors might work, but really, any cheap PC CRT monitor from the 90s on should work totally fine with this. To connect to PC CRT, you'll just need a way to convert the TINK's HDMI output to VGA. I love these cheap $10 adapters that are confirmed to be good quality, however, they don't extract audio. This won't be a problem if your source is analog like component video, as you could just skip the TINK and run audio directly to your AVR or speakers. If you're using HDMI though, you'll either need some kind of HDMI audio extraction, or just get a high quality HDMI to VGA converter with a good audio DAC built in too. And that's it. You just need a 4K RetroTINK, a compatible display, and some cheap adapters. Let's verify your sources next. Before starting, you'll want to verify your source content is actually 24p, and you don't need any special display for this. You could run through this testing on a standard 50 or 60 Hz display, as I'm going to be doing here. First, connect your source and start playing content. Note that the menus might be in 50 or 60 Hz, but once you start playing content, it'll switch to 24p, provided the content is actually recorded or broadcast that way. Now hit the Stat button on the RetroTINK 4K's remote. The third spec from the top should be frequency. If the vertical refresh rate is just about 24, you've confirmed you're getting a proper source, and that's basically all you need. If you see anything different, such as around 60 for NTSC, try different content. Maybe you're using a streaming service that outputs its video with 3.2 pull down already applied. I've definitely seen this before, and it's super annoying. Movies are always a good bet to start, as almost all are originally 24p. If you've tried different services and none say 24p in the stat menu, it's possible your streaming device just isn't compatible, but if you have a RetroTINK 4K Pro, there's one more thing you could try: inverse telecine. I use it for DVDs, Laserdisc, or analog media like VHS, but it's possible this will work with any streaming box that's not outputting 24p. To try it, back out of the Stat menu and go into Advanced Settings, Deinterlacer Film Mode Setup. Scroll down to Inverse Telecine and press the right arrow to start searching for 3.2 pull down. Give it a while and see what happens. If it just stays at searching, or if it's constantly jumping between locked and searching, there's not much else that could be done, and it's most likely the fault of the content, not the TINK. See, some content was filmed in 24p, but edited in 50 or 60p with 3.2 pull down applied before the editing. If enough changes have been made to the source footage, it might be impossible for any device to reverse. That said, if you see it lock on and only jump around different locked settings without ever going back to searching during normal scenes, maybe just between scene transitions or something, that means it's working. Now you'll need to enable Judder 24 Hz for proper cadence. A quick note, if you're testing content on a 50 or 60 Hz display like you see here, and enabling Judder messes with the signal, just leave it off until connected to your high frame rate display. I'll mention Judder 24 Hz again when it's relevant. Okay, so now that you know how to verify if you're getting a 24p signal, let's go over how to set up your RetroTINK in order to take advantage of it. The first thing I always suggest people do in these videos is update the firmware on their TINK 4K. It's as easy as just extracting a zip to the SD card and just updating through the menu. Mike is always adding brand new, completely free features, so definitely take the minute or two it takes to do this. And other than making sure you're on a new firmware, if you're connecting to a 120 Hz or higher display, setting up the RetroTINK is as easy as simply setting the output to 1080p 120 and enabling Genlock. If you don't have a source connected yet, it might give you an error, but that's fine. Genlock is important as that's what scans the input frequency and makes it a perfect match on the output side. Said differently, if it detects a 2397 signal, If the TINK is set to Genlock, it'll display each frame 5 times and output 119.85 Hz, not an exact 120 where you might get some frame tearing. I guess if your display has an issue with this, try enabling VRR, but I've honestly never had an issue with Genlock and 24p sources. Even if you plan on just running the TINK at 1080p 120, I strongly recommend learning how to make custom resolutions via mode lines, both because that's what's required for the next section using PC CRTs, but also because if you plan on using your RetroTINKs for 24p content with BFI, you'll need these custom mode lines, so please stick with me. Start by loading GuzPaz's mode line calculator in your browser and enter the resolution and refresh rate you're looking to set. You'll probably want 1920 by 1080 as a resolution, and let's use 96 Hz as a refresh rate for 24p content. Just a quick note, I'm using 96 Hz for a couple of reasons. First, it's very likely that your display will treat this as a PC signal and not add any TV or movie-based processing. So it could be a great resolution and refresh rate to start out with to compare how the RetroTINK handles 24p versus your display. And anybody in the retro gaming world knows that at least sometimes relying on external processors for your content is actually better than what your TV has. Also, 96 Hz was used on some excellent plasmas for 24p sources, and it's also one of the refresh rates we'll be using in the next video on BFI, so this is a good mode line to have. Anyway, now hit Tab to move to the next section, which updates the page, then scroll down. You'll see some different RT4K custom mode lines listed. Verify the numbers match. You could see 1920, then 1080, then 96 here. Now highlight and copy the CVT mode line, which is the first one listed under RT4K custom mode lines. Next, insert your TINK's SD card into your PC and go to the mode lines folder. Open one that you don't need, or you could always rename one of the existing ones temporarily as you try this. Then replace the mode line in the file with the one you just copied, then save the file. Then just close the file and eject your SD card. Now insert the SD back into your TINK and load the custom resolution. You can do this through the menu or just by pressing the corresponding button on the remote. Now go to Sync Lock in the HDMI menu and press the right arrow to set the output to Genlock. I suggest saving this as a profile since this might be an output resolution you go back to often. Just back out, go to Profiles and hit Save as New. Now eject the SD card, I do it right here in the Profile menu as it won't hurt anything, and plug it back into your PC. Go into the Profile directory and rename the new profile to whatever you'd like. I'll just call it 1080p 96. Note that this profile will also reference the mode line file, so make sure to keep that one as is. Save and eject the SD card again. Now plug it back into your TINK, which should still be at the Profile menu. There you go. Now if you want to enable 1080p 96 with frame lock, you just have to load that one single profile. And remember, you could experiment with any multiple of 24 for an even cadence. I suggest testing this against your TV's processing of 24p and pick whichever you'd like better. Or in the case of displays with no native 24p processing, now you at least have an option. So if you're only using flat panels, you could skip the rest of this video if you'd like, and just keep an eye on the upcoming BFI video to learn how to take your 24p content to the next level. But I really hope you'll stick with me, even if you don't own a PC CRT, because this is some pretty cool stuff that I think most of my fellow nerds would at least be interested in seeing. In order to start testing 24p content on PC CRT monitors, you'll want to start by creating at least 2 custom mode lines. The first that's going to be compatible with basically every single PC CRT that's been released since the 90s, but you'll also want another one that's 1440 by 1080, the native resolution of Blu-rays, or whatever is the next highest resolution that your monitor can support. Start by creating a custom mode line the exact way I just showed. I'm pretty sure all PC CRTs from the 90s up can accept 640 by 480 at 72, so let's start with that. As a note, don't bother trying 24 Hz, as pretty much no CRT will accept a 24 Hz refresh rate, no matter what the resolution. And even if it did, you'd get a really flickery image due to how a CRT works. See, a CRT draws the image with a beam of light, one line at a time. Our persistence of vision is what creates the illusion that there's a full image being displayed on the screen. However, we're relying on that beam of light to draw enough lines, enough times per second, to make that happen. Since at 24p, that beam of light is only drawing less than half the frames per second you'd normally see, the image doesn't persist as much and you'd end up with a bad flicker. And the same is true for 48 Hz in most cases. Drawing each frame twice isn't as horrible as 24p, however, you'll still get too much of a flicker for it to feel natural. I guess maybe if you're watching really old film footage, 48 Hz might be a good fit, but it's mostly just annoying for movies and TV. So copy the CVT mode line of 640 by 480 at 72 Hz, and maybe make another one that's 96. That could look a bit less flickery to you, or you might actually prefer the 35mm feel 72 Hz allows. I'm also going to make a mode line that's 1440 by 1080 at 72 Hz, as this would allow 4x3 Blu-rays to be displayed in their native resolution. Another note, multiples of 24 higher than 96 on a CRT shouldn't look any different, but hey, experiment with that too if you'd like. Next, do not connect the VGA cable to your PC CRT yet, but connect everything else and power it up. This is a safety precaution. See, some CRT monitors just give a basic warning message if you send them a resolution they can't handle, but others might not have that protection, and you'll want to wait until the TINK is outputting a proper signal to connect it. After giving your TINK a few seconds to boot, press the resolution button on your remote that corresponds to the 640 by 480 72 mode line you just entered. Now connect the VGA cable, and you should see the TINK's confirm resolution screen. Hit the right arrow on the remote, then enter to confirm. Like before, go into the HDMI output section and set the output to Genlock. One other thing you'll want to do that's helpful with CRTs is go to the Advanced menu in OSD Firmware, then set the on-screen display position to Center. This will be a big help when saving resolutions in case your CRT displays it way off center like this one did when I first started testing different resolutions. Now save a profile for these settings. I'm actually going to take this one step farther and both rename it, then make it the default profile so I never have to worry about connecting my TINK with an incompatible resolution. It'll just boot into this PC CRT safe resolution every time it powers on. Unlike with CRTs, I've never seen a safety issue by sending an unsupported resolution to a flat panel. Worst case, if it doesn't work, just wait for the TINK to boot and hit the 1080p or 4K button on the remote to switch it to a compatible resolution. Okay, let's start testing content. I'll show a DVD first since it's the same resolution that we're outputting to the CRT. I'll make sure main content is playing and we're not at a menu or anything. The player is in Source Direct mode, which means no changes are being applied to the DVD, so I'll enable IVTC and wait for it to be locked. Okay, we're locked on, so I'll enable Judder 24 Hz to switch to an even cadence. You'll probably have to adjust the CRT centering controls, as that's just how CRTs worked and what we all had to do after switching resolutions or sources back in the day. This looks incredible. I'm watching low-resolution content in its native format on a cheap CRT, and it looks great. Also, film grain that often looks noisy or dirty on an OLED just blends perfectly into the CRT's mask. For me personally, this CRT film grain effect is equally as important as proper cadence of 24p playback. Some old content like this, at least in my opinion, looks even better this way than on a projector or an OLED. Just a quick side note, since I only have the equipment to make 60p videos, I have my GH5 set to record in 59.94, but set the shutter to 71.8 to match this refresh rate. That means what you're seeing at home will still get some judder, as well as the annoying moire pattern and all of the shortcomings of getting footage of a CRT. I really hope you'll get the sense of what I'm trying to show though. Once again, IVTC is a feature that requires too much processing power for the CE's chip and will only work on the 4K Pro. That said, most Blu-ray players have their own IVTC function for DVDs built in, allowing it to scale to 1080p 24, essentially allowing you to use that with a CE, and you would just treat it exactly the same way you would a Blu-ray, which is what we're going to talk about next. First, I'm going to power cycle the TINK. I'll explain why later. Now I'll load up that 1440 by 1080 mode line. If the 1440 by 1080 at 72 mode line is too high for your CRT to handle, try replacing that with a lower one. I'd personally keep trying all 4x3 resolutions until you find one that works. 1024 by 768, 960 by 720, and 800 by 600. My guess is most PC CRTs will at least accept 800 by 600 at 72 Hz, but just keep going down the list until you determine the highest it can handle. Once you've found a resolution that works, confirm Genlock is selected, the menu is in the middle, and save the second profile just to make things easier. As a note, playing DVDs in higher resolutions probably won't look any better. However, it's the opposite for Blu-rays. If your CRT can't handle 1440 by 1080, dropping down to 1024 by 768 will barely look any different. Just make mode lines to try whatever you'd like and save profiles of your favorites. Anyway, now I'll start playing a Blu-ray of content that's 4:3. It's working, but the image is centered with black bars. No problem, just go into the Advanced menu and into Scaling Cropping. Scroll down and try the vertical only auto crop. That should be all you need, but please remember that you'll have to calibrate the CRT again for every resolution. Some CRTs will only need this once, while others might have you do it each time you change your resolution. Once again, that's not TINK related, it's just how PC CRTs worked. This is incredible. High definition 1080p content with proper cadence on a CRT. If I saw this as a kid, my brain would have exploded. I mean, it was probably possible back then, but with a multi-$1,000 processor, not a sub-$500 TINK CE. Okay, let's power cycle the TINK and try widescreen content. Here's an X-Files episode on Blu-ray, which was remastered in a wide resolution by rescanning the film and adding the originally cropped sides. Later episodes of the show were broadcast in widescreen, so you might prefer to view it this way, and I still think it looks awesome. But the first few seasons of the show were originally 4:3, so you could try running the vertical only auto crop again. In most of the episodes before they started broadcasting in widescreen, this will look fine. You'll have a look close to what you'd have seen on an original CRT, just in an insanely high resolution with proper cadence and beautiful looking film grain. I'm not sure how many TV shows are available in widescreen now, but were originally broadcast in 4:3. But if you know of one, give this a try and see which you prefer. Unlike content that was meant to be viewed in a widescreen format, there's no right answer for this, and don't feel bad cropping the sides. Oh, and let us know in the comments if there are more shows like this. My fellow CRT nerds will appreciate it. If you want to go back to 16:9 mode, you could try loading a different profile and then reloading the current one, but power cycling only takes a few seconds, so I usually just do that. That's why I mentioned power cycling earlier. I never need to do this with 16:9 displays, but I power cycle every time I change the source content when watching on a 4:3 CRT, just to make sure none of the previous settings persist and mess with the image. Remember that you could always make the CRT profile the default one, so you won't have to worry about sending an out-of-spec signal to your CRT when first powering on. But overall, this is just nuts. You have Judder-free 24p cadence, the black levels of a CRT, and 4:3 content fills the screen perfectly, all on a display that you could probably still find free or near free. And with older content filled with film grain, it'll probably look better than almost every other scenario out there. So look, if you already own a TINK 4K and any PC CRT monitor, you absolutely have to give this a try. Even if you run an experiment and decide all the effort is not for you, I guarantee you won't think it was a waste of your time. And even if you're sticking with modern displays only, if you use your TINK 4Ks for 24p content, the custom mode line and proper cadence info I taught in this video is required for the upcoming BFI video. And Blurbuster's new BFI is something everyone with 120Hz or higher displays needs to try. Before I go, a couple of quick but very important shoutouts. First, I'd like to thank Mike Chi for putting so much effort into making the RetroTINK 4Ks work so well with TV and movie content. It's an awesome video game scaler, and it never had to be anything other than that, but I think Mike recognized how helpful of a tool these could be, and I really appreciate all the features that were added. Also, I'd like to thank Fudoh, who, as usual, helped me take this video from something okay into something much better. I've been relying on his knowledge and help since the birth of RetroRGB, so thanks very much. And also a shout out to VFX artist Chris Dawson for giving me the idea of the film strips at the beginning of this video. It's still my crappy effects and animation, but I wouldn't have thought of that without Chris, so thank you to you as well. Anyway, if you liked this video, please consider subscribing to the channel, and there's plenty of ways to support even more, including ones that are completely free. Clicking on the RetroRGB support page and scrolling down will bring you to affiliate links that let you buy stuff from Amazon at the exact same price, but we get a small cut. Just click that link before going to your cart to help us out. If you're not super into this stuff, but feel generous, maybe leave a tip directly through PayPal or Ko-fi. Even the smallest tip is appreciated, and links are on that same page. And if you rely on info like this, please consider signing up for monthly support services like Patreon and Floatplane. We recently turned off all ads on RetroRGB.com to make the experience better, but there's no way we could have afforded that without amazing monthly supporters. And of course, we have some fun RetroRGB merch available too. If you want to broadcast to everyone around you that you're a fellow CRT nerd, check out that link as well. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.